having a bit of a chat in the Jabber room if you want to review that. As it notes there, the discussion in London was around weighted fair queuing, but we don't have a reference for that at this point. That might be something that would come fairly quickly out of TSVWG. It's also something where we might decide that in addition to having that as the long-term plan, we need something that this means in the shorter term. So that shorter term would be, an escape valve version of what priority means at the moment. If you would like to make comments on that, please start sending them to the main RTCWEB list, and we can have the discussion there. But hopefully we will get text from a combination of Randall and Michael Tuxen in time for further discussion at tomorrow's meeting. Okay, I think that means Magnus is up.
Okay, you're hearing me. Good. So I'm here on helping out some other people. It's not my draft, but so I'm going to talk about codecs for audio interoperability. The draft is draft browsed RTCWEB audio codec for interop. Next slide. Good, great. So background here is that this draft contains interoperability discussion. It's an informational draft. It's intended to provide assistance to web developers, the browser implements, etc., on what codecs to consider for increasing operability, where you can avoid transcoding to maximize quality and of fidelity and delay. So, and there's a list of codecs. Currently, it's AMR wideband, AMR, and D722, I think, and puts them in the appropriate context where they're being used, etc., and what you gain of implementing that codec. It's totally open to further updates with any other codecs that people really see motivated for interoperability. Next slide. That's the background. So the proposal around this draft is actually to have it affect the audio draft. We're just putting in a reference, and that's the red text here. So in section 3 of the audio draft, put in a reference to this interrupt draft, saying, okay, we already have that text about other suitable codecs. And this would be a pointer to suitable codecs that you can update, etc., independently. And they're only informational, and it's providing you some guidance on what you might consider to implement. So, and having the reference there totally makes this independence progress and a minimal change to audio, so we can move on and getting that working finished up. So that's the first part of the proposal. The other part of the proposal is to adopt this draft as a working group document. The current list of codecs and component text seems rather stable. It's been around for a while. There haven't been much talk about it, but it's been around there. Comments?
Magnus, this is Ted Hardy speaking. Magnus, could you or Stefan comment on why you selected the set of codecs that are currently in there, what particular drivers there were, and whether you expect significant expansion?
Stefan, can you? Or, well, for my pick, I can go on this long for a moment. So I mean, the current set of codecs, AMR wideband, and D722. So the AMR and AMR wideband codecs are heavily used in the cellular industry. MR is basically required by all mobile phones that comes out of the 3GPP compatible. and G72 is decked from and a couple other systems. So I don't know how much. I mean, I think from my perspective, it seems to be K list. How much expansion depends on others. Bernard, do you have a?
Yeah, so I'm reading this document, and it contains a number of statements that I think are going to be problematic. It says things like Opus won't be deployed outside of WebRTC. Well, Opus is very widely deployed outside of WebRTC. Kind of tries to paint a picture of how WebRTC is going to go that I think is probably problematic to put in a WebRTC document because we don't know where this thing is going to go. It's already been deployed much more widely than we thought and all kinds of stuff. And also just looking at it on a purely technical basis, stuff like G722 is grossly inferior to Opus on every dimension, right? For the same amount of bandwidth, you get much better quality in Opus or vice versa. So, you know, I can see putting in stuff like for these interop things, these following things are valuable, but any kind of value judgment really is not going to have much of a technical basis, except maybe for AMR narrowband, like down at a very low bandwidth where you might claim some technical superiority. And I wouldn't want to like pigeonhole WebRTC and say, oh, this is only for the web or only for this or that. It's just, I think it's inappropriate for us to do that.
So, short response to that. I don't disagree with your statement. I think from my perspective, the really important thing about this draft is the interoperability, avoiding transcoding. These codecs in some cases aren't. I mean, Opus might be better, and I don't gonna judge that. I think the important aspect is how widely deployed they are and how the gains of actually not avoiding transcoding to them. So I think any such value judgment is, I mean, that's part you can clean up. So.
Hi, this is Gary. My name is Qualcomm Innovation Center. I'd like to add, even though we're not co-signers to this document, all three of the codecs listed in there, we have optimized implementations across our family of current chipsets, so that ensures mobile support. We cannot say that right now for Opus because Opus is still a relatively new technology.
So Gary, that's actually Ted Hardy speaking. A clarifying question there. As you note, that the document actually says are available for the browser to use, and so the mechanism by which the browser has access to these hardware accelerated codecs, that's currently exposed, and in what?
Yeah, well, the question was to me, and I'll let you respond. It's hard to be rude, but that's an operating system by operating system basis. My particular organization works with any and all operating system vendors to expose those. How they make their own business decisions is not totally in our control. But I understand the point. It's perfectly valid.
Yeah, I don't want to contradict you, but in many cases it isn't exposable through the operating system. It's a black box, and doing it in any other way would expose WebRTC browsers to royalty payments. So this is not as simple as you make it out, right? If this stuff were available, were widely available and easily implementable and surfaceable, it would be there in more browsers. It isn't. There are reasons for that are technical. I won't go on, but I think that's misleading.
I agree that this would be that we would take several days for a whole debate on this. I think we can't. Yeah, you're right. We won't be able to address this in this form.
Yeah, just a clarifying point to what Bernard said. It's he was referring to AMR and narrowband wideband. G722 is available free and it's inferior in quality, but there's really no known barrier to implement it.
Okay.
So excuse me, Stefan, can you hear me or?
Yes, Stefan.
Okay, thanks. I finally to connect. Thank you very much. I just would like to insist that we just rely on what is already stated in the audio draft. That is, it's recommended to include in the other suitable audio codecs that are available to the browser. So the state is already in the draft. So the idea was just to give a little more guidance in an informative document, but it's just rely on this statement to give additional information. On the purpose is not at all to compare the different merits of codec, but just to focus on just only the interoperability issue, and only if the codec is available to the browser. So this is, I would say, this is a limited purpose, but at least we think it would be beneficial for interoperability.
Martin?
So I was going to make the point that this seems a slightly odd way of trying to get browsers to implement some codecs for you, which seems to be the point of this. Perhaps if the goal, so if the goal here is to try to get other people to do some work for you, perhaps you should ask them to do some work for you. Or do the work yourself. I mean, some of us operate open source browsers, and you can send us a patch anytime.
To that point, again, G72 support is there, but specifically disabled when building both Mozilla and Chrome. Yeah, I understand that, but it's like you specifically, it's a build flag. Like you change it, it's going to be there.
So my point was, perhaps this is the wrong forum to be having that discussion.
Hi, Alston. I propose that we do not reference.
It was very bad.
I propose.
Stefan, can you wait? Harald, go on.
I propose that we do not reference this draft. End of story.
Stefan, what are you going to say? Please go on.
Stefan, I think you're still muted. Stefan, was there something you wanted to say? I see him as unmuted, but I don't hear enough to go forward. Stefan, could you switch to Jabber?
Hello, I'm sorry. The connection is very bad. My internet connection, so I'm here from time to time. Is there a question for me?
So we wanted to know if you wanted to answer any of the comments that were made by Harold or by Martin.
Yes, but ultimately I didn't hear very well because of the indication. We asked or formulate a comment. It would be very helpful for me. Sorry for this.
Okay, so the question that Martin asked was, given that this seems to be aimed at browser vendors implementing a codec or exposing a codec, maybe this isn't the right way to do it, but maybe direct interaction with the browser vendors would be more effective. And Harold said that he did not feel that making this reference was appropriate.
Well, I think the idea is just to, I would say if I'm not to understand exactly the comment, but the purpose of this is just to ensure that, I mean, there are APIs to give access to the codec that are implemented in the hardware that are supported in many devices. So the idea is just to, if the codec can be available, just to be able to offer to establish the RTCWEB communication. I mean, this is the purpose. So I don't see what are the other proposal related to RTC. I mean,
This is
Um,
Gary Mundium again.
I'll go after Gary.
Yeah, this is Gary Mundium again at Qualcomm Innovation Center. I agree that there may be an issue in the industry as far as open APIs are concerned, but that has not prevented us from working directly with browser vendors to expose optimized implementations of these particular codecs in question. This also applies to the video codec issue as well. I think that's a little. I think the issue of open APIs. I don't think it should be. I know it's relevant to implementers in the context of the implementation, but I'm not so sure it's relevant in the context of this particular document. I think that's an implementation consideration involving all parts of the ecosystem, including chipset vendors such as Qualcomm.
I guess the
yes, but
message that
we
I'm
do. I mean, let's say that if the code we address the fact that the way it is available, if the API exists, if it is implemented, if the codec is available, and this is the statement that is in the audio draft, and it's included in the established code. And the way it is available to the browser, it's an implementation issue that is not addressed by this document. So we do not invent what is already in the specification. More information on the suitable codec. There is only currently in the audio draft, there is only suitable codec. We believe that suitable is not sufficient. It's it's useful to have additional information what means, but there is no more in the draft.
Anyway, what I wanted to say is we kind of been running through this for a really long time around those particular codecs, and I know that again I participated in this before and was trying to essentially use this group as a mechanism to force browser vendors to implement those additional codecs. It's not necessarily it's not working, and it doesn't seem like it's going to work. So I'm not sure if publishing this draft will progress us any further in this point, because they will simply ignore it as an informational draft. So this is, again, I understand the purpose of this, but I think this is a little bit of a waste. We just need to kind of go in the corner with the browser vendors and figure out what needs to be, how they need to be bribed to basically put those three codecs together, because they know why they need it. They specifically not implementing it for unrelated reasons. Not necessarily some of those like work related and support related. Some of those are I don't know. I assume are political or not necessarily. Not I would not again just or strategic from their point of view of promoting certain other codecs in advance. So so anyway, I'm not sure that this draft progresses us to any like any reasonable outcome that any one of our, like either browser vendors or us want. Like it doesn't move us any further.
I concur with Harald. We should not reference this draft. I have no problem with it proceeding in some other fashion that is not us.
And since I was in the queue, I will echo Ecker's comments. If someone wants to publish, here's how you interrupt, that's fine. I don't think we should be referencing it.
In the room, sorry, is there anybody else in the room who wishes to comment on the draft at this time?
So Martin Thompson, I just wanted to say, Ecker said don't reference. I'm saying don't spend time on.
I'm fine with that. Okay. So is there anybody else who is a remote participant who would like to comment on this draft? I'm now looking at the one co-chair who's still in the room, since my efforts to lure our other co-chair back in failed. I'm not hearing support for adoption of this draft at this time. Okay, so I'm not hearing support for adoption of this draft at this time. I would like to ask the authors to continue to carry it forward independently. I think what that means is that we probably also will not have this forward reference to it. I do also want to take up the comment that was made by
Bernard, yeah.
Bernard, that at the moment this makes a number of predictions about the adoption or not adoption of particular other things, rather than focusing purely on its own interoperability mechanisms, and that it will probably be easier to progress either through the ISE or through other mechanisms if those are not present.
Yeah.
Okay. Any further comments on this before we move on to our next topic? Okay, then the next topic is to go back to the issues list at GitHub. Could you try and tell them that we've moved on to GitHub and see if we can get them back in now? There's a little pod of people outside who apparently didn't care about audio codecs. Okay, thanks very much, Stefan. Thanks very much, Magnus, and we'll move on here. Just give me a moment to readjust back to GitHub.
Is this all the standing between us and lunch, Ted? Is this all the standing between us and lunch? Wow, because we're not gonna, I don't think we're gonna need 2 hours. Well, I mean, I'm sure you can manage it, Martin. If anybody can, you can. Oh, I'll need my laptop too. For GitHub? Just to give it your credentials? Okay. That's done. Okay. So, okay, well, we start there. 21. So, yeah. So this may just be my fault, but when I went through this draft, I noticed it had this really quite strong statement about M-line recycling, and oh, maybe I should turn it on. Yes, that better? So when I went through this draft, it had this quite strong statement about M-line recycling, and my memory had been, maybe my memory is faulty, my memory was that this was not mandatory. A strong agreement did not have strong consensus in London, but Justin apparently remembers otherwise. So I'm not sure I feel strongly about this either way, but I didn't. But when I say 2119 must, I asked that we get consensus for this. So
I guess the only question I have is why is appropriate media type even relevant? If the M line is unused, it can be reused for other.
If it's been disabled, set port to 0, you can change the media type. This is for the half open thing where you have one side doing a send-only stream and the other side is not currently using that slot. You could then reclaim it. So, you know, Krister had a question about whether that's actually a good idea or not, saying that, you know, if one side tries to add to that M line, the parameters might not be quite right for that, the other stream that already exists. If we think that's actually a real issue, we could only recycle disabled M lines and not half empty M lines.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can, of course, do as you suggested. I mean, if it's one direction only, but I don't think we should have it as a must. So.
I think it's really important that the behavior be deterministic in all browsers.
I agree with that statement.
I made all these arguments to Justin against doing this and exactly the same thing, and he convinced me I was wrong on every single one of them, that we were going to have weird failures if this wasn't deterministic and we weren't as aggressive as possible, basically, on regathering these things. So I think I sort of became convinced that we should do this.
I mean, just as a matter of principle, I'm really strongly feel that what the browser actually generates has to be deterministic. Either in we don't understand what it's supposed to do, and we should just give up, or we just need to write down what actually happens and just do it.
I concur with that. I think it either say must or must not.
Christopher, I'm actually okay with your latest proposal. So if the port is 0, we can have a must reuse. I mean, I think that's the latest suggestion you had on the list, right?
It's not on GitHub, so it must be on the list.
No, it's not going to get, but it's on a RTCWEB mailing list. Yeah.
So the proposal is to reuse only if and only if the port is 0.
Yeah, that's a proposal. I'm not convinced yet there's actually a problem, but if we think it's a problem, that is the trivial solution.
I'm not taking a position. I'm just trying to get down what people think. Thompson?
Yeah, so the concern that I have is we have some rules regarding allocation of media stream tracks to M lines for generating answers. And those are pretty much the same rules that you would use for selecting lines for reuse, I think. So if you have, if you're generating an offer and you have a line that would be receive only, setting that to send receive and attaching a compatible media stream track to that line would be, it follows the same rules as for the answer, but I'm being told it would break things.
Well, it actually goes against the offer answer in the sense that if you have a line which is receive only, you're supposed to send the send only. That's a stack. So unless we want to change this,
No.
and if you're generating new offer, then it's actually then the issue would be actual codec. You can have issues with codec compatibility because
the point here being that the only time that this becomes interesting is when you're making a second offer and you're looking to either create a new M section or find an existing M section that can be either repurposed because it's been negotiated off or it has a compatible codec. And the rules there are the same as for generating an answer, I think.
I don't think that it actually even requires a compatible codec because you are going to reoffer your codecs anyway as part of adding, changing it from being receive only to send receive. So what I would really like to see would be a trivial example even, of a case where this fails.
You are supposed to reuse the payload types for this line.
Well, you can. It's a new offer, right? So you can reoffer the full set of payload types, and the other side can say, well, no, I can only support X or Y or whatever. But I'd like to understand the case where this breaks, and then if we can all agree that that does indeed break, then we can just change the text trivially.
So yeah, it's like answers, except you have more flexibility available to you. Is basically what
You're way more flexibility,
right?
Because as Roman says, if it's send only, you can only do receive only in the answer. But if it's a new offer, it's new to you.
That's not entirely true, but yes. I think there's restrictions on what the offer can do, but I think that this is not one of those restrictions. So I think.
You need to keep the old payload numbers that you use, but you don't need to keep the same payload numbers. I mean, like different sites can have different payload numbers. I think that's one thing. No, it doesn't. I actually think this is an important point, that it's important to allow both sides use different payload numbers, because otherwise you get into all sorts of horrible problems, especially with bundle. And we actually have covered this previously and decided that, you know, even though there is a should in 3264, that really is antiquated and should not be, you know, we don't need to worry about that here.
First, I think the issue I had was more the existing memline, you know, whatever media you're sending or receiving there is, you know, it may have some different characteristics, whether it's bandwidth or whatever, and then the new media that you want to add, that you may not want to use those characteristics for that media stream. But now if we would have text saying, you know, well, you must use that memline because it fulfills whatever criteria. I don't think we should do that. I mean, obviously, if you have an M line which the port is 0, it's currently unused, then you can add that to whatever bundle group or specify whatever characteristic bandwidth, whatever you want to use for this media stream.
I mean, I'm somewhat persuaded by that argument, but I would really like to see a detailed example that we can all sort of point to and say, oh yeah, that really is an issue. And for posterity, we can then all agree, this is the reason why we made this decision.
So I'd like to propose the following resolution, which is to leave this text effectively as is. We have an issue for Krister or someone else to come up with a worked example of why you need to restrict to port 0. If they come up with an acceptable example, then we will, why you would need to restrict to port 0. And if there's an example that's convincing, then we'll add the restriction there and we'll add the note explaining it at the same time. Did I set a little appeal?
Works for me.
To us? Martin, are you describing this?
So Hasir, what I will do is that I'll also take a stab at it on the reasons why it could fail or it could not fail, and try to propose something on that.
Sure. I mean, I think that, but I'm supposed to leave this as is until somebody comes up with a counterexample. I mean, do people want an open, like, do people want? I guess the question I have is, do people want to hold? Sorry. I propose you not hold publication of this document pending this issue. If you got to get this to me by like some reasonable time period before last call, and so like I'm not gonna like come back. I'm not gonna show up in London. Sorry, what is it, Toronto, and say nobody's giving me an example. Like do we have an example? Like I don't see one. I'm just gonna let it proceed as is. Okay, so we're just gonna close this then. Okay. Close the issue with a notation as indicated below. Okay. Okay, see sections. Let's see, where's M lines? Might as well stay with the M line theme. Right. Number 19, please. So there's this, you know, there are attributes which can either be replicated, which are common between the M sections and could therefore potentially be merged and put in a session level description. And this has this very wishy-washy may. I would suggest that we should probably figure out what the right answer is and encourage people in that direction. My thought was to push them up to the session level for simplicity, but other people suggested keeping them down to the media level is better for, I think, explicitness. I honestly don't know what's better, but it seems like surely one is better, and surely you have some opinion about this topic.
Colin James. Come up in interop topics before with SDP. I mean, is there anybody who's been involved with SDP interop that's got opinions on this? Because I know I've seen it before.
Adam?
I mean, sorry, Chris, you know, I've been involved. I mean, I don't really have any on this specific issue. I think one comment I had is that if we want to make rules on this, I think we should also cover the C line, because that's another thing which you can have on session level or on media level.
I would actually say that for the interop, whatever is SDP compliant should work with this at the session level. So might as well make it a must and make it consistent, because it would make it easier for the interop instead of having, yes.
It's really easier to read.
Yeah, you still would be able to see it.
So, okay, I know at previous interop events we have discovered that there have been some things that could be put at either level, and some devices didn't do them at the session level, or didn't do them when they were at the top. They wanted them repeated in the repeated, which made the SDP larger, right? That's why I remember it. But I don't remember at all whether that's completely a bug from 10 years ago that's been fixed in every device, or was a bug in some vendor we don't care about, or what. I have no idea. So. If it, I think that that's the only thing driving this decision of should we, I agree we should say do it one way or the other way, but it's not clear to me which way is the most interoperable.
Well, I'm not sure interop in this particular case matters all that much. Again, Roman speaking. This is going through some sort of interoperability signaling proxy between this and all devices in all the cases. So might as well just make it deterministic, and if somebody needs it reformat it, they will reformat it.
And from my experience, I would agree with that. Since we're have anything that's going to be talking to a legacy device that might have such a bug, we'll have to go through some sort of device that can fix it. Let's just do that.
Adam Roach here. I do want to point out that doing this has the kind of surprising property that if you add an M section where the value for something you previously added at the session level is different for that one M section, suddenly everything in the SDP changes. I don't think we want that property.
Well, then we should discourage it the other way.
Yeah, that was what I was going to compensate. Like this shouldn't be a should, and I'm not even certain it's a may. This seems like kind of questionable advice. Yeah.
I think, I'd be perfectly satisfied to have it say you must replicate them across if that's what people wanted. Like, I'm just trying to this is not like determinism in the sense Justin was saying earlier, but it is a plea for consistent behavior.
Again, Roman speaking again. When you're comparing SDP, you basically want to parse it into a struct, and then compare versus just compare the text, because otherwise you end up with a lot of stupid surprises where things just start moving in random directions.
Sure. Well, I spent a lot of time comparing SDP text. I don't know about you.
So I just kind of audited what is actually generated by create offer to see what things actually could move to session level and would be unlikely to change, in future versions of the SDP. And really the only thing I came up with was the A equals fingerprint and, probably the, C line, and that's it.
Right. The equal fingerprint actually I think is required. We currently require to be the same, so we could require it to be session level if we chose.
Yeah, if we can identify these things, call them out.
I would say also maybe send only, receive only, that type of thing could be duplicated and then change and get exploded back again.
Well, those things could change it. I was referring to Adam's point of what stuff could actually change and end up migrating from one section to another. And if we're deciding that we would want to avoid that, then that only leaves a few things that are unlikely to change at all during the session. I think the fingerprint is perhaps the only one. And if that's the only one,
yeah, why bother?
Yeah. Yeah. So we're only saving bytes at that point.
So I move we make this should not.
I was going to point out the identity one as well as being
that's big.
This is the reason. I'd be quite happy to have them, identity is must session.
I suggest we make this must should not, and the things that are required to be common unconditionally, we say must session.
Especially big things, sure.
That sounds like a great plan. I'll just put that down.
Thank you. Okay.
This is Chris. I just, if we're going to add some taste, it's probably be good to say if explicitly defined to be used on both media level and session level, because obviously some attributes must be on a session level, like the
Absolutely.
the group attribute
Absolutely.
and so on. So.
Thank you for pointing that out. I will attempt to not screw that up. Let's see. Number 15. This is actually just a work item that we need an example for this case here. And I'm not going to move to another issue until someone else volunteers to give me an example. I'm trying to write this up. Okay. I just looked at this and was like, I want to make some other victim do it. Okay. Okay, we did that. We did that. Number 6. I probably should just email the list on issue 6, please. So this is listed as an open issue. I did not understand this comment, and I should have just asked Justin and Cullen, but I failed to. So can someone tell me what the heck this means?
This was the issue that we have to include the A equals STTP map that specifies the WebRTC or WebRTC data channel string, and I could not find that string defined anywhere, so I could appropriately reference it in this document.
Okay. Jessup, do you think you could manage to dig this up for me?
Okay. I can help resolve this. Yeah, I'll help resolve this.
Great, thank you. Okay. Number.
Just Chris, a small comment on this. Isn't this something which should be defined in the SCTP SDP draft?
I think it should be, and I think it may actually be there. If not, Randall should presumably do it.
Yeah, I've given that comment to Salvatore at least, saying that it should be there. So I don't think.
Yeah, if it isn't there, then I probably need to be added there, and I'll talk with Salvatore.
I think basically, either if it's not there, it needs to be added. If it is there, then we need. Once it's added, then we need a link to it in here, and we're good.
I just need a pointer to where to put it. Well, I mean, here it says SCTP data protocol, but I think the SCTP SDP might actually be more appropriate, or RTCWEB data protocol, and the SDP draft actually might be more appropriate.
Agreed.
So again, on number. Again, fair to do my homework. On number 5, there is a restriction on we require you to provide attribute lines, and we very helpfully say open issue handling of A equals image adder. I'm hoping that perhaps now that we have unified plan, we may be able to say something meaningful about this topic.
Well, I don't think unified plan actually says anything about this topic. And I think that
stressing,
based on that, and kind of based on the lack of any discussion of this, I don't think we include anything here. Is my current feeling that you use your media stream outputs X, and that's what goes on the wire, and that's what happens.
Seems entirely satisfactory to me, since I can do it very easily. No, I have to remove that open issue comment. What do you mean?
Right. No, I think it's still open. Though I agree with it that can't quite resolve it right now, I think it's still an open issue, right? The problem is you can't negotiate resolution. It's a real failure in trying to make interoperable systems, right? And this is the issue that we're trying to resolve with the VP8 payload draft. And once we resolve it there, then we'll incorporate what needs to happen over here. But I think that like we could update it to say waiting on payload draft and then we need to put advice here on how to deal with it with the significant codecs.
Well, so this text here, right? Basically, this text here, if you can't see it, is like a laundry list of all the different A lines you could put in, and then RC references for how to deal with them. So I assume what is your proposal that we should say an image adder line as specified in RFC blah blah, the VP8 payload type and the HG4 payload types?
More or less, but I'll let the lineup behind me beat me.
But now we just created normative reference in that document. Do we?
How to allow this, John?
Just
note that I think that the VP8 stuff is a red herring for two reasons. One is that the current proposal, one is that it's been waiting for a specific proposal for about 6 months to a year, and the other thing is that that from you. No, I have not seen an update since London. I pointed out to you why I didn't like the one you presented in London. The current proposal does not use image adder, so it's irrelevant to this precise issue.
Yeah, Magnus Westland. I mean, I think there's a point to actually discussing image attribute because it actually is used in some of the potential other systems out there, which actually do inform about preference for supported resolutions. I mean, it doesn't say you must use this. It says I prefer to receive the following resolutions. That's and even pixel forms and things like that. That's what it provides. So and I do hope that we at least have some discussion about this attribute in the ACE draft.
Maybe a better way to phrase this is the open issue is how to signal the upper bounds of the resolution that you're willing to receive. Is that would that correctly characterize the open issue?
Magnus, I think there's maybe two different ways. That's one issue, which I think you dial in. The other one is about going back to when we had a proposal for the COP and discussion with and Haraldson said that's basically discussion in, I think it was in Paris or was it somewhere else? It's at least like 2 years ago, where we said we're going to have preference signaling for resolutions, what you actually want to use now, and that in SDP. And that details of that proposal has never really been incorporated. So I expect you, Harald, to actually produce text for this, for preference signaling to indicate what I actually preferred to receive, so we can optimize this when you have smaller windows. So
I can do that based on my previous. Take my previous draft and see what I can suggest to incorporate in JZip.
Or are we suggesting that we would do something like, the actual video element size we would feed back using this image adder stuff, or do we just want to have some maximum bounds, as indicated by here's the maximum I can support, or do we want to just sort of say, we're not going to do anything here and we'll leave it up to application JS signaling to figure out, what should actually happen?
Being back the element seems like crazy talk.
So Magnus Westland, the conclusion of the discussion before on this was actually to indicate preference for resolutions based on, for example, the size of the video element. So you actually indicated to optimize the actual transmission to resolution you're actually displaying. I mean, it doesn't alleviate the need for scaling in either end, but it's at least can optimize the transport towards I'm not using more. I don't have any use for more resolution in this sense, so you don't need to send it. That's the signaling I think we would really discussed back then.
Right, but it means like if you resize the window on negotiation needed will fire.
It's worse than that because the initial offer and answer cannot be constructed with these values in it because the media stream is not assigned to a window to a video element. So the first thing's going to happen is on negotiation needed as soon as you.
We talked about that whole topic in a different in W3C, and we came to the conclusion that you're on right now. So that's not the relevant topic. The relevant topic is on how to signal this, not how it's bound to a video tag. Okay, the cases that were driven for signaling it is there are times where particularly where you are going through a translator between two video codecs where you need to be able to signal this were some of the use cases that drove it. And there was the additional question of whether the current level of constraints for VP8 would allow you to fully describe the hardware limitations of or the limitations of your hardware devices. Some people think you can, some people think you can't with the current ones. It doesn't really matter. It still doesn't work with translators. So that was what was driving it. And Harold also points out that 265 has the same problems. And it would be nice to address 265 in the same way.
Magnus, but yeah, that's one part. The other part was this preference signal to actually optimize the transport. You don't waste bits on. Yeah.
But if the target here is translators, then this section of the specification is about what kind of stuff the browser ought to emit.
Right.
And so there's a separate question of how if you're some non-browser entity, you instruct browsers about your opinions, but this is about what the browser ought to do. And so the browsers have only a very minimum set of data to do this kinds of things, right?
Right. So what's the maximum resolution that a Firefox OS phone can receive? And do you want to be able to indicate that before I send you 4K video?
Yeah, we might very well wish to do that. I'm not saying we wouldn't, but.
Or render window. I mean, you know how big your browser window is when you.
But I mean, my browser window is enormous. My browser window is is like 2,000 pixels wide. I mean.
Yeah, sure, but that's just barely over full HD. So.
My point is that I don't disagree with what you're saying about map. I guess.
So I'm not saying it must be there. That's not what we're really arguing. They're saying that there's some cases where you may want to be able to indicate it there, and what's missing, what we need to have in this spec is how you indicate it, if you want.
I mean, I think even more than that, I think you need to say, if X is true, then you stick an image adder in there with these values, and
But I mean, fundamentally, what if X is going to be is if you have some idea of how big you want the image to be, stick an image editor in here with these values and then reference these specifications, right?
Yeah, and that's what when we originally talked about this ages ago, even in the original requirements document, we were talking about using that browsers could use this to indicate the actual size of the window in order to optimize data transfer such that you don't bother shipping a lot of bits you don't need over the network, and improve the image quality as a result.
So the one thing that's kind of obvious is that that JSEP, when it constructs an answer, has to obey the rules for A equals image adder negotiation. So it has to construct an answer that says, if you told me you're willing to send, here's what I'm willing to receive, and vice versa. But the question that's still open is, what should we add to the image adder from local information to say, hey, it doesn't make sense to do more than X? And that's kind of tied to constraints. It also might be connected to doohickeys, if we ever do resolution there. But I think this is a bit more exactly what we send is a bit more complex than we can discuss over the mic. And we should say, okay, what we send in the image adder will be influenced by the size of the video that we're willing to send and receive, and the details have to be worked out.
So Ted Hardy with a clarifying question from the floor. So if I'm in a situation where I have what we discussed yesterday and have new media devices coming on and going off, so let's say I have attached a new screen, or I'm now screencasting to something with a much higher resolution than the device I'm on. Like I'm currently on a phone and I'm going to cast it to a television. I need to now send a completely new SDP offer, which may now include one of these, even though one wasn't previously included, and refresh the entire thing in that condition, right?
That's one possible thing to do.
Is it easier to do that if you always have this present, even if it's not necessarily giving you anything more than bounds, or is it easier for you to do if when you get a new piece of information like that, you want to refresh it now with it present? Thinking structurally.
I think it's easier if you always send it, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I was trying to get at. Is there anybody who thinks it's easier if it's not present part of the time?
And remember that image adder is a
Still
hint.
there's still some
it's not
discussion
a
of what
boundary.
it is, right? I mean,
Image adder.
well, but just a minute. You're the person that said in the payload working group you didn't want to use image adder for this, and that I should write a new draft, which I did and submitted. I would love to use image adder, but you need to have a consistent opinion across these two working groups.
No, you have conflated two
Really?
different issues.
Ah, okay.
One is hard limit, which is something that image adder does not permit at all, according to previous discussion in a music. The other one is what we do in what we can actually do use image adder for in JSEP, and not using image adder for what you are trying to constrain in payload is perfectly consistent with saying that, well, image adder is useful for this other purpose.
Okay, so what I said when I got up here to start with was the open issue is constraining the upper bound on the limits of the size. So I'm interested in the hard limit. If that's not image adder, then that's not it. That's why I said the issue is the upper bound.
Okay, but then, I mean, we basically should log this as two different issues, because this is preference.
So,
image attribute is suitable for preference signaling of the resolutions I want to have received.
So just so I understand, like, Colin, your position is that the browser ought to, for some 119 ought generate a value with a hard upper bound that is not just a visor like this is? Or your position is that we ought to have some mechanism in SDP to do that? Those are two different things.
That when a hard upper bound is negotiated with it, it ought to respect that. It should be possible to negotiate a hard upper bound.
Okay, so that's like, I mean, like
send and receive.
Right, that is like not even remotely the topic of this issue. That we could have a different discussion about that. I mean, again, this is about like what you're supposed to say, what you're supposed to generate on your offer.
Does it include offers that are an update to an existing offer?
Presumably, yeah.
Okay, well, then that would certainly be in the negotiation case, I think. So, I mean, I agree, maybe this is the wrong issue, you know, whatever, but I'm pretty sure that I'm the person who stuck that in the draft, and that's what I meant at the time. I'm happy to open another issue or rephrase it. I mean, look, that open issue, handling of AIM, is obviously a poor description of any issue.
Yeah, so right? I mean, so I guess I'm just trying to figure out how I mean, it sounds to me like you believe that there's not in fact, there's not in fact SDP specification language for how to do the thing you want to do. Or is that my understanding? That's correct?
I do not believe there's any RFC. There may be drafts.
There are codec-specific ones for H.264 and VP8. They aren't exactly the same, but there's no. I don't believe there's any generic one.
Is there? So actually, I was going to rephrase that. I believe there are. I'm not aware of one for VP8. I believe there is ones for every codec other than VP8 that's been standardized so far. It's just VP8.
There's a max frame size for VP8.
The max, that is where this whole thing started. There is a max frame size specified in macro blocks, not XY pixels. If it was specified in XY pixels, this would be a non-issue.
Not how it's done in 64 too?
This is a payload issue.
The corresponding thing, Stefan Wenger, the corresponding thing, my understanding, would be the level. And the level is specified in macro blocks as well, with an additional constraint of how those macro blocks are being put into a picture, saying that a picture can't be 10 times as wide as it is high. But I think that these guys did something very similar in the VP8 thing as well. So you know, are we sure we are not just doing codec politics discussion right now? Thank you.
So as chair, I'd like to see if we can come back to the issue that's currently here and see if the resolution to the next bit, which is Cullen's issue, is that he open a new issue that is specific to the hard maximum.
I will Stefan Wenger again, with respect to this, so I heard that gateways and translators are at issue here. I will remind you that a whole class, I've said that before, the whole class of video application known as IPTV or generally TV change resolution, horizontal resolution at least, on the fly on a group of picture bases minimum, right? Minimum. So sometimes they in the modern codecs there's discussion that they will change it on the picture on a per picture basis. But when you have an MPEG-2 system today or an H.264 system on dish networks and you grab a stream, you see that the horizontal resolution is dynamically varied based on the activity of the content. The codec, the encoder is doing that. And the scaler on the receiving setup box is supposed to blow it up to the right resolution. And the reason why they are doing that is because they would get too many artifacts if they wouldn't be playing with the resolution. Now, that is something which, if we were ever worried about either employing the same tool in our system, in our real-time encoders, or if we are worried about interfacing with similar designs as content sources in the compressed domain without going back to pixel values, then we have to say that image attribute is insufficient as it is currently specified in the negotiation phase, right? Because you would have to. I don't know how to express it, but it is just insufficient to say you have X and Y pixel dimensions and a fixed pixel aspect ratio if these are all parameters that are being played with dynamically.
So let's these types of communication systems, they're not played with dynamically. That's done in multi-pass encoders. It's not done in single pass encoders by Tannenberg, Radvision, Cisco, Polycom. So I'm not sure that it's not exactly the thing that's driving the problem here. I get what you're saying, but I think we still have a bit of an issue.
So I want to go back to the chair question here for a second. This particular issue says when, if ever, are candidates in local description.
So that's just bogus.
Okay.
Look above. That comment there was bogus cross-reference. The relevant issue is open issue handling of A equals image adder,
okay,
right?
but the question that I thought you were asking, and maybe I have this wrong, is when do we use A equal image adder?
Yes. So
right?
that's the question. So
okay. So what I'm hearing from this discussion is there are cases where it is not sufficient, or where it is not doing everything we want to do. But I'm also hearing that it is valuable to set consistently. Can we mark this one resolved as consistently set A equal image adder, and then open the new issues that reflect both the possible two-pass encoder issue that Stefan raised and the hard limit one that Cullen raised?
I can certainly not get behind saying we must consistently set A equals image adder until we know what A equals image adder needs to be set to and have a clear understanding of exactly when that it happens.
Okay, Magnus?
Yeah, I agree. I would task Google, probably Harald, because it wrote it before, to actually produce the text about how you set the image attribute input values. Because that was, I mean, as a result of them winning the discussion 2 years ago, I think it's still their issue to propose text for. So that's why I don't want to close this, but I think somebody need to produce some guidance text.
Okay, so Harold, are you willing to be assigned this bug?
I can be assigned this bug, as long as it does. This is about image adder, which is an advisory piece of negotiation. I'm willing to be assigned the bug that concerns that.
Okay, so we have an assignee for this. Does anybody have other concerns about this particular one? Obviously, there are other concerns that are going to get written up in other issues, but
yes.
Okay, yay.
I would like to understand, which of the 4 bullet points are in scope. Being able to, for the browser to honor an A equals image adder that's specified by the remote side, or the browser to honor a hard max specified by the remote side, the browser to generate a hard max once the remote side to actually honor, the browser to honor sort of a preference from the remote side to say, here's what the format I would like to receive, and the browser to express a preference to the other side of what it would actually like to receive from the other side, somehow tied to what it is based on what it's displaying.
So I think the first 2 are out of scope for this. Those are going to be in the issue that Cullen raises. The second two are in scope, and what the preference / hint semantics are is the bug we're assigning to Harold.
Very good.
So, thank you.
Okay.
So I think we probably, how would the chairs like to handle the question of whether or not we do need a mechanism for indicating hard limits? Because like that seems like wait, I don't want to get out of DC without knowing what the target destination for that is. Because that seems like an important. I mean, if that's going to be a hard, long pull in the tent, we need to get moving on it, right? Sounds perfect.
Turned the mic off instead of on when I was handing it to him. He said that he would write up a bug, and it will be on the bug list before we get to the end of the other bugs. So
I will say that every time we do this, my respect for Mark Nottingham's genius grows.
Yeah, let me put it this way. This is now between us and lunch.
Yes, and I did foolishly say, how could this possibly take, how could this possibly take 2 hours? Okay, so, perfect, thank you. Issue number 3. Oh, chicken, oh, awesome. So once again, we have an issue which I have no idea what the hell it means, but it is obviously clear. Open issue, use of app ID. My understanding is app IDs are awesome, and we should be using them somehow, in some way, which I don't understand.
Check. So this is relevant to the unified plan stream correlator stuff that we said we'd have some way of indicating how to do demultiplexing that was not SSRC based or payload type based. And the stream correlator stuff sort of was subsumed by app ID and basically said, we need app ID to stabilize to the point where we feel like we can reference it normatively from this draft. And that's what this 28 characters is meant to refer to.
Nice counting.
So Magnus Westland, and I think the actual issue about handling is mostly going to be handled for bundle from the AVSet perspective, because it's really primarily an issue of binding the streams to the M lines, isn't it?
Sure, but we need to generate the SDP that would then, do that right stuff. So
yeah. But I mean, the specification, what the right stuff is, probably is going to be in the context of bundle.
Yeah, although this would this apply? Could this also apply in non-bundle cases too? Perhaps not.
I mean, if you're doing completely non-bundled, you have the different transports and one streams per direction, so you really don't need it in that case.
Agreed.
So I was going to get up to basically suggest that in our discussions during the break, bemoaning the state of the app ID draft and how it would never actually finish, and all these sorts of other things, and how bundle depended on that draft, I'm thinking that perhaps we can say do bundle and let bundle worry with all the problems with app ID.
I agree with that.
Sure, but this document spells out exactly which attributes are inserted into SDP. And, we could say, well, do X as specified in bundle, but I still need to point to the right section within bundle that's going to indicate this. So we're just kind of moving it around.
That's so useful.
So I think so. The new bundle draft has a section talking about the stream correlation. Probably can just point to that one. And whenever we figure out the app ID, we should add it.
I mean, I can.
Says what are the SDP attribute defined?
Suhas, can we assign this bug to you?
So what should I do?
Send me a pull request that adds a cross-reference the right section of bundle.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, we have an assignee.
Dustin's not happy.
I still feel like we will have add A equals whatever, referencing section X dot whatever, of whatever, and that will not be enough for this document to get done.
That seems
like I feel what's missing here is some pounding on the actual thing that's going to specify A equals whatever.
Right. So your point is now we just created like a transitive dependency on bundle, which has a dependency on app ID, right?
Exactly. And then the fact that we're now saying, well, it's part of bundle has not changed the actual outcome of when we get done.
Don't worry. When we're in Toronto, M Music will decide it's part of us, and so we'll just it'll be cool.
Okay.
So from the floor, this is Ted Hardy saying, well, the problem seems to me that if we don't agree with whatever bundle says about how to use app ID, we're in a different sort of trouble. So we either have to make a pointer to them, we have to take the work back from them, or we have to coordinate it some other way. And at this point, the proposal is to make a pointer to the work and do the work over there. If you want to say we have to grab it back, I think that's going to be much more problematic.
Well, I'm not really saying we need to grab it back. I'm saying that if we want this document to finish, we need to feel good enough that what bundle currently says about app ID is spec'd out or spelled out enough that we can actually write the necessary text here. And if it's not, we need to figure out what's holding that up. Does it need to have more turns of the crank on app ID? Do we need to do something else instead of app ID? Like when we talked about it in London, the feeling was that, well, app ID is trying to do a lot of things, and maybe it's not fully baked yet. It needs a few more iterations. And if that's the case, then we'll be sitting here for a while waiting for that to finish.
So it's not clear to me that bundle required the use of app ID, though clearly the unified plan use of how we were going to use app ID in WebRTC did involve app ID. I suspect the text, whatever text is not in bundle needs to end up here. We've got some text, and Adam's going to tell us the right answer here, but we have some text that we need somewhere. Some of it needs to go in bundle, some of it needs to go here.
Adam Roach, I think it needs to go in bundle. I mean, I think this is not a WebRTC problem. The ability to distinguish among streams that are on the same 5-tuple is something that needs to be solved no matter who's doing it. So I mean, fundamentally, this has a dependency on bundle. Doesn't really matter where bundle's done. It's the same people. And we just need to push on that and make sure it goes. And it doesn't really matter where app IDs gets done. It's the same people. So, I mean, we have functionally this set of dependencies.
I agree. I'm just sort of pointing this out that that stuff is not on the glide path yet.
So, yeah, but I mean, functionally, I agree that there is a project management issue here, but technically, it's really clear to see this needs to say use bundle, bundle needs to say use app ID, and there's no breaking that.
And then once that's done, we come back and write this text. I mean,
if you want this to specifically reiterate what bundle says, yes, I'm not sure there's value there.
So, am I not mic'd? Oh. So perhaps one way to do this would be, I mean, who actually is implicated in app ID? Can they just get together for a half an hour some coffee break and see if they can make some actual progress on it today?
It's Jonathan.
Ronnie and Jonathan.
Oh, well.
They're not here.
They're not here. Well then, yeah.
They're not here in the global sense, not the today sense.
Actually, Jonathan just asked me for further details of remote participation, so he may join us later.
Okay, so look, here's my as an individual, my proposal to the chairs as an action item, which is, why doesn't Sean just, Sean gets the action item to beat appropriate people until they figure out what the status of this is and what we need to do.
That's what I was hoping for. Thank you.
Okay.
Because you and I are on the beat list.
Okay, so for Ben, who's our minute taker, we have 2 action items arising from this. We have Suhas has agreed to provide a pull request with the actual section of the draft, and Sean is taking the action item to work with the appropriate people to get that section fleshed out enough to be sufficient. Is that what I understand? All right.
That's satisfactory to me.
Sean foolishly has shaken his head yes, so we're done there.
And that includes the people in this room who can be helpful to the app ID effort. You should feel free to loop them in.
Say your name for the.
Okay.
Cooper.
Right. Okay.
I have that Suhas to provide a pull request to point to the actual right place in bundle, and that Sean is to push the work to get the right material in bundle.
So, okay, great. So we now have 3 remaining issues. I'm counting 30. The remainder of our time, yes. So the 3 remaining issues are rehydration, going back to issue 23, because Justin has produced a set of diagrams that indicate what you would do in these cases, and then issue number 30. So I suggest we do rehydration first, because I think actually we can bang it out pretty quickly, believe it or not. Issue number 2. Oh, wow. VP8 is the best. As what? You know what? This rocks. Just go to your Gmail, Ted, and then come back. Holy shit. Okay. Okay, well, so in any case, the current specification has like basically describes rehydration procedure in section 3.6, or hand waves about it actually. I would probably maybe a slightly more accurate. I think, you know, that, but as far as I can tell, it doesn't actually, there's no new technical mechanism required for rehydration. It just says like, because the way JSEP works, if you do the following things, rehydration will work, right? And so I guess, so the question in my mind is, are we committed to, is this merely a claim? And then we can verify the claim, and if it's true, or if it's true, then it's good, and if it's false, then we take it out? Or is rehydration a design goal of the system? And if it turns out that it's false, then we have to like go and fix it. Because if the former is true, then great, and I'll go and figure it out, or maybe ask Adam or someone else to figure it out. If the latter is true, however, then the situation is different, and I want to talk about what we're actually trying to accomplish. So, can people give me I'm personally not at all committed to rehydration. If it doesn't work, I don't really care. But maybe look people differently.
Apologize. Some company at the last WebRTC Expo conference was like demonstrating rehydration on different devices of different browsers, and it was all like they claimed it all worked, and they were like very happy about this. So of course I forget the name of that company, which makes us really feeling stupid.
I'm a little surprised it worked on Firefox. So that makes me doubt this whole demo, to be honest.
It involved an SBC in the middle to make
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little circumspect about some of these things as I kind of going down the whole rehydration path. You realize that rehydration in some ways is possible, but it's not going to give you what you want due to like problems like, you know, reusing crypto context or other sorts of things that you could easily like, you know, shoot yourself in the foot by doing it wrong. The 3.6 section mentioned here, I think, does work. But it does require like a solution to the problem was mentioned yesterday of kind of rejamming a track into an existing, you know, sort of sender and having it, you know, have the same IDs and appear sort of the same to the other side, because that's exactly what you end up doing. Is the new peer connection needs to basically send the track the same way it looked to the other side as before. And I'm not sure we have the right solution for that, as evidenced by the discussion yesterday. In short, like, I think we could make this work if we cared about it. At this point in time, I don't think rehydration has to be in scope of 1.0.
So should we just pull this out of this spec?
I have no opposition to it.
Okay. Shorter specs are good. Okay. So that mission accomplished on that. So that leaves us with the issue number 23, namely all this non-trickle stuff. And we have a proposal from Justin, or actually Justin worked up the 2 possibilities. So actually I suggest you go to this issue and then instead of going to the issue, link to Justin's document, which is the bottom here. And we can see 23. Justin, do you want to talk through this since like you did the work?
Yeah. So, so the first part is the kind of existing code of how a WebRTC endpoint would deal with either generating offers that are trickle or half trickle, or by basically having an answer that works properly, regardless of whether the offer says it supports trickle or not. And then there's a second set of cases of if we did the thing we talked about yesterday, of actually making create answer not give the callback until it had gathered all candidates, then how the code flows would look in those cases as well, and that's the second set. The TLDR here is that the actual amount of code is about the same either way. The main, the code is slightly simpler for the create answer not returning or not giving the callback until it's gotten everything. But there are two things I think that are worth mentioning. One being that the actual sequence of callbacks changes if you adopt the create answer not giving the callback until everything's been gathered, because it means that the ice gathering candidate or on ice gathering state callbacks need to be issued while create answer is outstanding, which is a bit of a change in like what applications may consider the state machine. But the thing that I think is actually significant is that if the application wants to have some sort of timeout as to when it wants to kind of just send the answer, with whatever candidates it has, it may be contacting multiple turn servers or some things on multiple networks where it never gets a response on certain from certain servers. It no longer has the ability to control that directly. If the application is managing the candidates manually, it can decide after a second or whatever, it's just going to fire the answer. Whereas if it has to wait for create answer to come back after deciding I've gotten everything I can, it has no ability to control that explicitly. So given that, I think that control is actually something that the applications probably want to have. I think it's probably worth keeping the existing behavior in the first set of cases.
That last point seems pretty compelling to me. So just to be clear, you propose that we had PC can trickle or some such nonsense, and yeah, okay, that seems like a pretty good argument. And it would be set to be false in the initial case, or on the assumption that you don't know. Something falsy, right?
Well, I mean, I don't think we set to. I mean, I would have it set to undefined or null, or I mean,
those are all falsy, right? I mean, those would.
Sure.
If you wrote your code this way, you would get that behavior, right? That is, if you wrote your code, if you wrote all your code with the offer and the answer with checking can trickle, and it was set to falsy by default, then the offer and answer could share the code, and you get the default. You get half trickle automatically, right?
I see what you're saying. That like, if you in your offer you're deciding what to do,
which totally can happen, right? Because in repeated offers you can trickle.
Sure. As long as it doesn't say false when it's really not known.
Right. So I suggest undefined. Or undefined true and false.
I think that's perfectly fine.
Okay.
You could make it a nullable boolean in
right.
YDL, and then you get null, but that's perfectly fine too.
Sounds great. Yes. So the first point is that we're going to go with the application's responsibility. So there will be some sort of attribute on the PC, like telling you whether you can trickle or not. Provisionally called can trickle, but really up to the WebRTC specification dudes to figure it out. I don't think they're here, but maybe we'll get back to them. And that it will have three states: a true, a false, and some sort of undefined value, which will evaluate to false if you just do it, which will be falsy if you evaluate it. And the undefined will be the initial value. So that way you can have consistent logic. All right, great. So we're done with that one. That leaves us only with the most exciting issue of all, issue number 30. So Cullen has written this up, but I think it can be easily summarized as there should be a way to indicate in the SDP a mandatory to respect image size. Is that accurate, Cullen? Is my summary accurate? Oh, okay. So I guess we need to discuss this. I think that the relevant question is, number one, is this important? And number two, is a normative dependency for the specification?
Okay, so I think something like this is important. We've had this reported as like one of the non-interop, like one of the real interop bugs that people are having with the browsers, are trying to make them work with existing devices. So this has been reported by multiple people that they need some way to line this up, particularly with the translator issues. Now, I think what's been problematic about this is how to do this is probably an issue for the payload working group, when we don't have an RFC that says exactly how to do this for all of the codecs we use. We have it for some of them, but not all.
Ted Hardy, and that was actually the clarifying question I was going to ask. It says there needs to be some way for a browser to indicate the upper bound of what it can receive. Does it need to be able to do that on a per codec basis after it's negotiated the codec, or as part of the negotiation of the codec, or does it need to be able to do that generally? And I can actually picture cases where you might have hardware capabilities for
it could go either way, right?
Yeah, so that you might have different ones for different codecs, right? And
Absolutely.
so you might have different upper bounds for different codecs. So I think it functionally has to be done on a per codec basis, which makes me wonder if there's anything to do here that isn't payload specific.
So, given that discussion, does this need to be set by the application? It seems like the user agent's the only thing that would know some of these things.
So don't we already have ways to indicate that you have a maximum macro block rate and all those sorts of other things? Those are the things. Well, VP8 has that. 264 has that. All the codecs have that. Isn't that sufficient from the perspective of or are we talking about something else?
I mean, it's been discussed on the payload mailing list a bit, but no, it's not, is unfortunately the problem.
No, is that not sufficient for dealing with the codec specific side of this, or is it still codec specific on the?
One of the problems is that this has not been discussed on a payload mailing list. It's been mentioned, but the discussion has petered out. I have tried to kick it a couple of times, but most recently it's 5 minutes ago. But there seems to be a serious disagreement about whether we really need hard width and height restriction in addition to macro block decisions. I mean, with all codecs that I'm aware of at the moment that have macro block limitations also have this language saying that you can't be too insanely wide or high. But there's a discussion about this.
One comment from Jabber from Jonathan Lennox. He observes that there's a difference between bigger than this isn't useful to me and I'll choke on bigger than this. Screen real estate versus decode CPU.
Yeah, right. The other question is that if you have some sort of hardware decoder, it's limited in macro blocks per second, but that's across like all media streams. And if you're receiving like multiple, if you have multiple m equals video lines for receiving things, like how should this be filled out?
Stefan Wenger, I have yet to see, I have seen, but the vast majority of hardware decoders can't deal with more than one video stream at a time. The vast majority. And for software, of course, but for software, load balancing works actually fairly well. But the hardware people, they don't do context switches typically between different, certainly not among different resolutions.
Every Cisco codec supports multiple stream.
Every VP8 decoder shipping Android device that supports multiple streams, decoded simultaneously. So
Are there a lot of those?
Got one in my pocket.
I'm trying to figure out how I'm looking to the chairs to help resolve this topic. Like, I mean, so I mean, I think the first question that I said is, I mean, it sounds like this. Is this not a codec specific issue? It sounds like it is, and so it sounds like the most we need here is a requirement that they support it. But I guess I'm confused. Colin, confused what you want to do.
So before Colin, Randall, it looks like you were trying to speak to the group.
Yeah, there are codec limits. It's very hard to figure out how to break them up when you have multiple streams, even if you do support decoding multiple streams. To a certain extent, it's not an easily solvable problem in the general case. I think having limits per codec is, a good thing, but those are handled by the existing things within the codec specs. Beyond that, I'm not certain exactly what to do here. So I didn't have a very specific comment. I had unmuted because I might want to talk.
Well, we're always happy to see you. So I have a quick question before we go a lot further. Are there any non-web RTC systems that need this on a non-payload specific basis? And if so, what do they do?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same issue when you're trying. So when you're trying to, let's say, do an H.263 to VP8 translator, okay, nothing to do with WebRTC, right? But you're trying to signal that in SDP, and that thing is sending you the translator is going to send to the invite an invite or an offer in some form or another to a device that's going to send it some video, and it needs to tell it what resolution video to send it, because the way it's translating and forming that in something else, it can only deal with a specific resolution. It's not an issue of number of macro blocks. It's specific resolution. It has to be CIF, right? You need some way of indicating that. And in all of our codecs up to this point in time, with the exception of VP8, we have a clear way of doing that. Unfortunately, it's mostly different on a per codec basis. It'd be nice if all codecs going forward in the future use the same sort of syntax in SDP to do this. It's pretty much a payload type topic, and that's the issue we're running into here.
Okay, but what I think I just heard you say was, yes, there are other systems that need this, and what those other systems do is actually still payload specific.
No, what those other systems are doing is they can't really build this system that works in an interoperable way until the payload draft gets finalized for VP8 that will say how to do this, right? That's the issue that's holding up the draft and has held up this discussion.
I think I probably put my question badly, excuse me. So my question really is, in conditions that are out there in the world now that don't involve VP8, let's set that aside. Somebody who's taking a maximum stream and they wish to express, hey, the maximum H.263 size stream I can handle is foo. How do they indicate that in SDP?
So Ted, there are examples where you can't achieve interoperability based on maximum decoding complexity expressed in microblocks per second and constraints. Those are legacy stuff. For example, H.261 or H.263, the first version of it, had a very limited number of very fixed picture sizes, and you had to match exactly one of those. You couldn't play with them. So interoperability with these things, obviously you need two-dimensional picture dimensions if the other codec has more flexibility. But my personal suggestion is that the latest of those standards that I'm aware of that was ever ratified was H.263 version 1, and that was in 1996. Perhaps we can consider those things legacy and ignore them. Thank you.
No, you can specify any resolution for H.264. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, let's just assume that we can, for 264 and VP8, we can specify what is the total macro blocks per second, total maximum resolution for the hardware codec or any codec limits. And for one stream, I would think you could just read that from the user agent could read that from the hardware and then just stuff that into FTP and say, okay, don't send me more than this. Like, I'm not sure what to do if there's actually more than one M equals video line. And like, that's the one, like, if there's one M equals video line, I think it could be done. If there's multiple ones, like, I'm not sure what to do other than like divide it by half or whatever, you know, so.
I would suggest in that case to simply duplicate it into all of them. I realize that that would allow the person receiving it to send more than you can deal with. If they were to accept all those and send them simultaneously, that also assumes that you have no available fallback software decoder to handle things. But I think that's the only reasonable thing to do in this situation from our perspective, and leave the rest of it up to the user agents.
Okay, that's inexact, but I'm fine with that.
The only variant of that, I mean, like as you identified, there's no great answer here, right? But you get to answer more than once, right? You can take your first stab at it, and then as the streams adjust and come on, you can readjust them later to move your fingerprints down and your main screen up, or whatever, or your thumbnails down, your main screen up I mean, but I don't. You know, should we be able to do something like that? Yeah, but we already can do something like that. That's already in the specs, right? And I don't know. I mean, should we say something about here? Maybe.
I mean, that starts getting into like preference versus what's the maximum I can actually do. And I feel like we're not going to converge very quickly, you know, right here in this room on like, you know, anything better than what Randall just suggested. So I'm fine to sort of taking what Randall suggested and saying, you know, you should stuff in, you know, for each codec, you know, in each M line, you know, the maximum the hardware says it can support. And for software, you know, we don't do anything.
Okay, so I'm hearing an assignment of this bug to Randall to write that up into a pull request, and moving on from there. Is that approximately correct?
I guess no, I'm confused because as I understood it, Cullen's claim was that the syntax for VP, I mean, there's a question of how you indicate it. There's a question of how you deal with multiple M lines, but there's a simpler question of how you indicate it for each codec. You know what to do. And I understood Cullen claiming that in fact you could not do that for VP8. So either you can and then we're good, or you can't and it's not a requirement, or you can and it is a requirement, and in the last case we're screwed. So like we need to resolve that.
So I think it's payload specific for each payload type, right? And so his claim is that the way you do it for VP8 is less common and maybe less effective than the way you do it for the others, right?
I think your original summary, we're not going to make much progress here about nailed it. And it's, you know, it's a topic we need to go discuss somewhere else on. What some people claim it's not needed, some people claim you can already do it, and some people claim you can't do it. And we need to dig into that and find out what the answer is.
Sure, well, sure. I mean, surely we can get consensus here on whether it's needed or not. Well, I don't know. Let's try to address that, because like I'm stuck with this problem that we have. This you want to create a norm dependency to something which you then say isn't done, and then this document gets stalled. So like we need to like I need to either get that done or get not the dependency or something, right?
So we had a lot of strong. I think we should encourage our ADs to make sure that the conversation between the participants in payload and the chairs of payload actually happens, because at the moment I don't see any sign of the payload chairs actually forcing this issue to be resolved. And before that issue is resolved in payload, I don't see it being resolved here.
But the question of whether it's mandatory to have, we could resolve today, right? The question of whether it's a functionality we depend on, we could resolve now. I mean, maybe not, but it's in principle resolvable, right?
There are things we could point at. Whether that's a sufficient solution to the problem or not is exactly what Karen and I disagree about in payload.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm expressing myself badly. What I mean to say is,
critical piece of information. We already normatively depend on the VP8 payload draft, and that is the draft in question. It may end up depending on something else or not, but I think that we already have the normative dependency that's being discussed here.
Where is that dependency?
But let's back up one more step. Okay. Ted.
But doesn't mandate VP8.
Okay.
That's the problem.
So this is me raising the chair issue. I think that the question that was being asked by Ecker is fundamentally, do we want today to try and come to a sense of the room over whether or not this maximum is a key piece of functionality that we cannot ship without? That is, we will hang ourselves if we don't get it. Whether it would be awfully nice to have and we should go push on getting it done, but we could ship without it, or this is something that's payload specific and you use it on the payloads where you got it, you don't use it on the payloads where you don't. Do people think it's valuable to try and resolve at that level today?
I don't see how this is not payload specific.
Right, but I guess my question is like say that like I scientifically prove to you that like the VP8 draft didn't do this, right? Then we have to sit back and wait for Harald to finish it. I mean, that's the question I'm trying to get at. I agree it's payload specific. That seems obvious.
So I don't think you quite answered the question that I was asking. Do people feel it's valuable to try and get a sense of the room of that today? Do you have an answer to that question?
Of which?
Okay, the sense of the room I suggested was, how urgent is it for us to get this feature in? Is it we must have it to ship? It would be darn nice to have and we should push on it, or it can go out without this being on every payload and we'll use it where we have it.
I understand. Okay, I think that's fine.
Okay, so we could take that sense of the room.
My personal view is we shouldn't, and the reason
should not take the sense of the room.
Indeed,
okay.
because this is inherently tainted by the political arguments of the mandatory to implement video codec selection, and because of that, because that topic is currently curbed for very good reasons, we probably should pick it up at that point in time.
This has nothing to do with which video codec we're talking about. Okay, it's equally true for any video codec. The question is when I have, do we want to be able to do things like if my iPhone cannot possibly decode a 16, 4K by 4K video stream when you send it down? Do we want to have a way that it can say, don't send me a 4K by 4K video stream, right? And it doesn't. Is not tied to any particular video codec in that sense. It's about resolution and whether you can negotiate them, and it's particularly important when you're doing translators.
This is Adam Roach. I'm agreeing with Colin. Regardless of what the MTI ends up being, we need to support this for non-MTI codecs. This is a general problem that has nothing to do with mandatory to implement.
And what I was going to suggest in what we discussed assigning before was basically say that for any codec, if there is a hard maximum that the UA can decode, it should indicate that using the appropriate payload payload spec parameters for that codec.
Okay.
Or words to that effect.
Okay, so I think that if I can map that to what I was saying before, Randall, that was the third of my choices. I have been suggested, it has been suggested to me from our ADs that I add a fourth choice, which is, I don't want to talk about this today, let's go eat lunch. So I'm going to ask 4 questions to the room about this feature, and this feature, they will be the following. I must have this to ship. Raise your hand now. This would be darn nice to have, and I will help go push on this in the appropriate places. That will be the second. Third is I'm okay with this being available where it's available and not available where it is not. That is, it's payload specific and I will use it when available and I won't use it if it doesn't happen to be. And the fourth will be, I don't want to talk about this, I want to have lunch. Does everybody understand the questions? Okay, question 1. I must have this feature to ship. Please raise your hand now. For the note taker, for the sense of the room, there were 2 people who raised it. This would be darn nice to have, and I will help by going to push it where it's needed. You may raise hands for everything you like. Okay. So
He also wants to have
1,
lunch, I'm betting.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I saw 9 hands for this would be darn. Oh, I missed Adam. There would be 10 hands for that one. I will use this when it's available, and if it's not available, it's not available. Raise your hands now. I see 8 hands raised for that one. I don't want to talk about this. I want to have lunch. Raise your hands now.
So there actually is one more issue I didn't catch it.
So there were six hands. 6 hands raised for that.
So I'm feeling good about myself now.
Yeah, but we can get to your issue before lunch. Okay, so there were 6 hands there. There's clearly not, a glaring, obvious result among the bottom 3. Although I suspect some people didn't raise their hands for lunch who wouldn't mind it if it were offered to them. So I think for the moment, probably the best thing to do is to stick with what we were talking about before, which was to have Randall generate the text that he's going to propose, and then for us to discuss that further on the list. But that for anything that's payload specific, there should be anybody who cares should be over in payload trying to resolve this as quickly as possible. Whether you think this is I must have it for a feature or darn nice to have, resolving that relatively quickly on the appropriate list will be there. And if we could assign an action item to our ADs to assist with that, as was previously requested, Richard is accepting the action item. Please minute that. Okay, there was one more issue you wanted to raise before lunch.
Issue number 4.
Issue number 4, just a moment.
So topic here is CNAME generation. That there's a big open issue. It doesn't tell you what it should do. Martin proposed something, I think this seems straightforward, which is that by default we use all the MSTs in the RTC peer connection, unless they explicitly had some different time base, would use the same CNAME for synchronization, and that we would hope that at some point in the future the WebRTC API would allow us to do other things if we wished. So this seems like a reasonable. This seems like a reasonable design to me. And if it's hard to see what else we would really do. But I guess maybe Colin thinks it's not a reasonable design. So.
No, I mean, this seems most reasonable. I'm not quite sure about the unless. I mean, what it means for 2 tracks to be in the same media stream is they're synchronized. And my understanding is that meant they should have the same CNAME. I mean, somebody correct me if this is wrong.
The same PC is the.
Oh, in the same PC. Okay, I heard Ecker wrong then.
Yeah. I'm proposing we take essentially this text, so
Yeah. So this is basically the discussion that Magnus and I had on the list, and it went on for quite a while. The upshot of this is there's some API affordances that this sort of imposes up from our RTP layer back up on the applications. It does potentially mean that in some cases you won't be able to, if it's not possible to synchronize tracks for various reasons, there's some things that the W3C API can express but shouldn't be able to express. And I don't know if we want to do anything about that there, but I'll raise the issue there.
Okay, but what do you? This doesn't. It doesn't look like your sponsor says what you think things should happen if it's one peer connection, but the tracks are in 2 different media streams, right? In that case, it seems like they should be different CNAMEs. No. Okay.
So, Magnus Westland, no, they really need to be the same across all because they actually CNAME also is the endpoint identifier. So, and they have the same synchronization space even if there are different media streams, even independently. So they're coming from the same, and they actually have the requirements from RTP level to be on this, having the same CNAME.
I agree with that, but I think that means to have the streams have any meaningful semantics, that the semantics that we agreed on, because we've now removed CNAME's ability to express that, it means that we need to use the lip sync groups.
Sorry, I don't understand. You have one timer base from one endpoint. All media stream tracks sent from that endpoint needs to be synchronized into the same space.
Totally agree. No arguments there. But that 2 tracks are in one stream means they're supposed to be synchronized, and that 2 tracks are in a different stream means they're not supposed to be synchronized with the other one, right? That's why we generate. Not required to be synchronized. And in fact, we would prefer them to be played as soon as possible. So I agree they're in the same CNAME, they're in the same space, same sender, okay? But the 2 that came from the same stream should be in one lip sync group, and the other track that came from a different stream should not be in that lip sync group. And the important reason for this is so that like a screen share stream doesn't slow down your audio video streams. It needs to be in a different thing, or else we'll have we can't have those lip syncs, or we will have huge latency on the other thing.
Yeah. So okay, if let's see if I can paraphrase this in my own words. So the requirement you're actually looking, saying, oh, this is synchronized in the same time space, but however, you don't need to care about synchronizing these different things.
Right. Right. And so you can do things like the screen share at a much lower bit rate. And when the huge iframe comes in, you don't have to block the audio, which is a real problem, to allow that that screen share to catch up again. So I think maybe we've got another issue to open on that.
I think I can just write this up with this resolution.
So this resolution, yes. The use of LS groups as well. I mean, you know, to cover the whole lot. I normally just raise new issues and solve them all together. But yeah. So however you want to manage it.
Okay.
So I'd like to get a resolution to that. Is this okay? In general, yes, I think that's yes. And B, do we want to use LS groups to signify the grouping of things that fall into the same media stream at the API level?
But you
right.
Have a mechanism for that. Sorry, I mean, today the MSID provides the which is in the same media stream. So the question is if you actually want to indicate that these are, you can, I mean, it's probably an implementation guidance that you might be more, I mean, it's a receiver's choice to synchronize playout to some degree. And that's actually what you're going. You're going into guidance saying that different media streams might not be required to really follow the same unless you.
Okay, I mean, the legacy stuff doesn't support MSID, right?
No, but I mean, it's if you have a single gateway to understand that you have this different concept, for example, the share screen, you can provide it towards the WebRTC endpoint in such a way that it looks like one.
Yeah, I'm not okay with resolving that as a resolution to this.
But I mean,
the signaling gateway has to totally rewrite the SDP from one style of semantics to a different style of semantics and use a thing that was not meant for lip sync here and replace it with something that was meant for lip sync there. This makes no sense. That's just gratuitous work that makes no sense.
But okay, so then I don't. Let's see. So what is this legacy endpoint providing? Is it providing 2 different CNAMEs today?
Yeah. Well, it will correctly do what I was saying with the lip sync if it gets different CNAMEs. Things with different CNAMEs, it wouldn't try and synchronize.
So,
right?
But we have a requirement on being able to handle 2 different incoming CNAMEs or multiple different incomes. So if you let the CNAMEs go through in that legacy endpoint case, but I mean, from a JavaScript, I mean, if they already provide different CNAMEs today, they're already desynchronized. But I think it's wrong from an RTP point of view to having one endpoint sending them like that.
But it's how it was the recommended way to do lip sync before LS was invented. Then the recommended method became LS, which I'm happy to use. And now you're suggesting we add additional semantics to MSID to mean synchronize, which is really far beyond what MSID was ever meant to be or what it says.
I mean, that's what the API level says. The stream tracks, current or at least the latest version I read of the.
That is clearly what stream means in the W3C context.
That's
right.
It's an
but what
application
we're talking about here is how to represent the. We have a clear way of indicating things that are meant to be synchronized at the JavaScript level.
Yeah.
And now we're asking the question of how we represent that in SDP in a way that will work. And I thought we were using CNAME. You're proposing here that no, that's the wrong thing to use, and I'm fine with that, but that means we need to go use the right thing to use, which is lip sync groups.
No, I mean, you have MSID that tells you both the media stream tracks and the media stream track ID. But I mean, if you have a grouping and you actually replicate it into SDP already today, I don't understand why you need to add another mechanism, because you already have a mechanism in place that
we
gives.
We don't have a MSID mechanism that means that.
Yes, you have. To my understanding, I mean.
Not in legacy equipment.
No, but from the JavaScript endpoint, so it's. So I mean, I think you're raising major questions. So you're actually not talking about CNAMEs. You have a request for saying, we want to have support for lip sync grouping in WebRTC. I think if you raise it that point, we can discuss it in that way. If that's the requirement you're for.
There has always been a requirement for lip sync in WebRTC. It's been discussed in many meetings. We agree with it. We have semantics for how to represent it. Now we're just getting into how do we represent that in SDP. So yes, that is the issue.
Okay.
How do we do lip sync? And I thought we used CNAME.
Okay, and my understanding has been that we can't override the CNAME context for an RTP, and we have an MSID that identifies both what gives the IDs of the media stream tracks, and it also tells you which media stream tracks are in the same media stream. Therefore, and the definition of a media stream is this requires synchronization or are synchronized. Therefore, you have the information available. It's also replicated in the SDP.
Is there any legacy equipment that implements that?
I mean, Is
there any browser today that implements that? I mean,
no,
is the answer, right?
Yes.
And we have a way of doing that in SDP that is standard today. Why would we not use it? I don't understand the argument against it.
Redundant information. I guess that's probably the main argument.
So Jonathan, you're up.
Oh yes, hello. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, good. So yeah, I mean, I agree with the statement that doing it with CNAME is bad because media stream tracks can be, added to different media streams sort of, more or less at will, whereas CNAMEs need to be stable. I would argue thus that it'd be better to use lip sync groups, which are a semantic which is dedicated to just this purpose, rather than try to use MSID, which feels like it has a lot of different semantics. And I always hate loading too many different semantics into one signaling element, because you always end up discovering that you need to do different things for different semantics. So I would say a +1 to LS groups, just because that has the semantic that you want for this. That means that when you change it, when you rearrange your media stream tracks, it's a fresh offer answer, but I think everything's a fresh offer answer, so whatever.
Okay. I mean, yes, as long as, but I mean, fine.
So let me see if I can summarize where Jonathan's proposal leaves us, and that is we continue to use MSID because they have other semantics as well, and that you would add LS group for lip sync for that specific semantic. Is that approximately correct?
Yes. And the one thing we need to figure out is, what does it mean if there is not a lip sync group? Does that mean everything is synced or nothing is synced? But I think if there are lip sync groups present, I think that is what we want to do.
Okay, Magnus, it looks like you still have a deep.
I want to see text rather my. I mean, I think it's likely that it might be the right direction to go, but I think there's corner cases, etc., and you need to write up this to see if it's actually pans out.
Okay, and I think that that's fair enough. I think the question that I actually had on this was that if you have lip sync groups and the MSIDs don't match, what does that mean? And that's a similar corner case to this. If you have lip sync groups and the MSIDs do match, then everything's hunky-dory. You've got your suspenders, you've got your belt, you've got lipstick, you've got your pig, everything's good. But I do worry that if you have them disjoint for some reason, what that syntax turns out to mean is somewhat confusing to me. So now I am looking for a Stuckey, and you're still on the big screen there, my friend Jonathan, for generating a pull request / text to cover the mechanism for combining lip sync semantics with the existing MSID methods. Can you take such a assignment?
No.
I truly wish you could see the room right now, Jonathan, because you got a remarkable result from your.
I don't know. So, I mean, first of all, I'd have to figure out how to use get, but I can probably figure that out. So I don't know. I guess maybe, but since Colin was also advocating it, I mean, I don't actually understand LS groups that well. I haven't actually used them in stuff I've written, so I'm worried that I'm going to miss something. If there is somebody who's used them, that would be awesome.
So look, if you're willing to write up the general guidance, the statement to the email list, and and you can just send it to the email list or to Martin or something and say like, look, here's how I think we should close this. As you don't have to go and do it in the document, okay?
Okay.
I will figure it out in the document, and I will have Fleming, who actually understands lip sync groups, review it.
Okay.
Okay. And then Magnus can look at it and see if it looks reasonable or not.
Okay. I'll try to put that on my to-do. Okay.
All right.
Okay, anybody have further issues they wish to raise before we break for lunch?
All right, so I will be, over the next few weeks, taking these issues which are allegedly resolved and marked editor ready and preparing pull requests or pledging other people to do them. So, and then we'll be, generating new editor drafts of the documents, and we'll produce a new final ID for Toronto. You'll probably also be seeing mails from me, a list about saying like things that it turns out we still need to complete. I'll also be hassling you. If you are people who promise to do stuff, I will finally be in the position of being the guy who hassles people as opposed to the guy who is hassled for failing to do the work.
It's always nice to have a hobby.
That's good.
Okay, so just before we break for lunch, during lunch, we're going to try and coordinate a little bit with the W3C folks to make sure that we have the timing for tomorrow correct. So if you're listening remotely, we may send something to the RTCWEB list adjusting the timing of tomorrow's start time. Not clear yet, but look for email on that. And I'll send email one way or another. The other thing is we will reconvene today as WebRTC at 1:30 as previously announced. So that will have a different hangout because of the recording issue. So please remember to rejoin using the new calendar entry. Thanks everybody, enjoy your lunch.